Lopez Radio, kind of live, mostly recorded. Episode 351. It's been a while since I've done this, but I'm kind of excited to do it. To follow the show at Lopez Radio on all social media. You can check out the show on Twitch, twitch.tv/Lopez Radio every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. We play video games and shit talk one another. It's kind of fun. Joining me today is a gentleman who has been on the show before. It's been since February of 2019 since he's been on the show. But he's coming back to join us. He's a fellow Twitch streamer and someone who I can now call a pretty good friend. We hung out in TwitchCon in San Diego, and it was a really, really good time. Welcome in. Bryan, the Ape Fist. What's up, man?
Hello.
How
Good
are
to
you,
be
man?
back.
Hey, man.
Pretty well. As good as can be being stuck in the house for, what is it, 100 and... I don't even know how many days it is now. It's been a long time.
It has been a good little while, and me and you have kind of gone back and forth on what that feels like after a while. It's even though we're both kind of homebodies, you work from home, and I've been working from home, and I like being at my house and using all my equipment and doing all this stuff, but at the same time, it's the lack of the option to get out there.
Yeah, who likes to be told no, you can't do whatever it was you're used to doing for your whole life,
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and you can see that kind of wearing on a lot of folks in general.
Some certainly more than others. I mean, for me, it's okay because it's in the best interest of the health and well-being of myself and my family. But yeah, it's you can see it. It's running its course.
Yeah.
To put it politely.
I think you popped into my chat the other night. You were just kind of like, I don't know, man. I don't know what's happening. I think I'm cracking under the pressure.
Everything's going to shit. Yeah.
It has been really odd. I mean, I was thinking about it yesterday because we actually did our first actual big going and doing stuff and seeing people for Mother's Day this past weekend. And it was weird. And, just to be out of the house as long as we were, because usually it's just it's a supply run. We're going to go get through the zombies and get back and lock the fort down.
Right.
But it was also interesting to see how a family acts, because there are some family members, and I'm sure you've got people in your life that are the same way, that are kind of like, look, if you're not hugging, I respect you, but I think it's fucking stupid. And you're like, are you really respecting? When you say it like that?
It sounds a bit disrespectful when you put it that way.
Yeah. But I don't. It went fine. It was good to see everybody, but at the same time, you're kind of in the back of your head, you're like, am I putting someone at danger? I know I've got grandparents here. What's going on?
What's the rule of thumb they gave us? It was you should treat everyone as if you have coronavirus and you're trying to protect them by keeping your distance. I think that's what it was. So I think people have it backwards. It's like, oh, I'm not sick. You're the one who's sick. And it's like, well, really, if you adjust your mindset, you're going to develop much more healthy and productive behaviors for a time, but I hear you on that. We didn't have any Mother's Day stuff here. We did within the house, but we didn't go visit anybody. We sent flowers and phone calls and text messages and things like that, but we didn't do anything. We didn't go see anyone. The only thing that we've done is we did have a drive-in night where we were going to order a projector and a blow-up screen and have a movie in the driveway and invite my brother and sister-in-law, who live a stone's throw away, basically. And we drew chalk on the driveway, and they had their side, we had our side. And what I did was I just carried a big screen TV outside, set it up on a table with some surround sound, and we rented a movie, and we had a drive-in night in the driveway.
It's kind of cool.
And it was a good time. It was a nice change of pace as opposed to just being inside and being stuck watching things inside of the house. But it was good, but it was a little bit awkward because my niece is 3 years old and she wants to hug everybody all the time, and she approaches the line and we're like, oh, wait, no, hold on, you're getting close, you're getting too close. And you feel bad because she doesn't know any better, and I mean she knows what's going on. She's aware enough to where she understands, but she's kind of like, all right, I guess you don't love me anymore. You just see that look on her face, and it's it kind of breaks your heart a little bit. But it was a good activity, and I want to do more of that kind of stuff. But it was weird how it sort of the dynamic of the interaction changed, and you know.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too that one thing I noticed was like how subconscious some pleasantries are. Like
Oh, sure.
you walk up and you stick your hand out. Like it's just a thing, you know. You don't you
Just what
stick
you
your
do.
hand out.
Right.
You hug somebody, especially if it's someone you care about and that you've known all your
Sure.
life. And
Hmm.
it was really weird because I'm not gonna lie, we definitely slipped up. We'd be sitting there talking with someone and we're getting ready to leave, and I'm like, all right, good to see you, and like didn't even think about it.
Not supposed to do that.
Not supposed
Right.
to do that. So it's just kind of like then you get home and you're like, did I did I just did I get
Did I
infected?
screw
Did
it
I
up?
infect somebody? You know, and it's
Hmm.
scary, and it's like an entirely new way of thinking about how to just live life normally.
Yeah.
And
At the very least, it's going to affect what we do for a time. I think we'll eventually fall back into the old ways of doing things, and some I think will do so sooner rather than others. But some people don't even believe. I mean, I'm not. I'm going to walk a line here. I'm just going to toe it gently here.
mm,
Some people don't even think this is a thing,
yeah,
and so to a certain extent, um, you know, they'll jump back into things as if nothing happened at all. But some of us, I think, are going to be like, like okay, so the wife and I were talking about going back to Disney World, and we were talking about like buffets and stuff like that.
mm,
And we're like, man, can you imagine going to a buffet right now? And we're just like, no, not like I can't even imagine what that's going to be like if and when we ever, when we do. I'm sure we will, but it just makes you think twice about it a little bit.
well, it almost looks like when I picture a buffet right now, I'm picturing, you know, in cartoons when you got the smell lines coming off of everything. Like
Hmm.
that's what I picture now when I think about a buffet. I'm just kind of like you just see smell lines of viruses just hanging out
Yeah,
around the buffet, and you're just kind of like, how do I break that? Because like you said, for some people, it's no big deal. You know, they're like, whatever, it's just as
it's
normal.
a joke. Yeah,
Including really close family of mine that are just kind of like, I'm not wearing a mask. This is stupid. And mask or no mask, but like to say it's stupid and be like, look, not that many people are dying. It's just kind of like, not that many people are dying, and they're people you don't know. That's why it doesn't
right.
matter to you. You
It's
know?
not inside your house. It's not right in front of your face. And so until that happens, it's going to be hard to accept. And that's the point, though. You don't know if and when your number's going to be pulled if you're not doing the right things.
Mm.
And that's what scares the hell out of me the most.
Right. And it's just like, you know, there are other diseases out there that don't kill nearly as many people, you know, and but it's still completely devastating when it affects you, you know.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's such a weird, and you don't want to get mad at people you really care about, but you get mad at people you really care about. Like I had a
Just
day
kind
this
of
past
internalize
week.
it.
Yeah, I had a day this past week where we've obviously well, if you follow the Twitch channel and you follow my social media, you know, we lost one of our dogs a few weeks back.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we're kind of getting to the point where we've got one dog and he needs a buddy. So we're kind of looking. And one of the
Hmm.
places you look is on Facebook. You kind of look, there's some groups that help rescue dogs and have
Hmm.
dogs that are available and stuff like that. Well, there's also the temptation of being like, what's the timeline look like these days? And then I looked, and it like bummed me out for the entire day. It put me in the mood that only sleep could get rid of. One of those moods.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, and you don't want to get mad at people you care about, but man, like at some point, it toes that line of like, man, I respect you for so many things, but this is like killing me right now.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
it's weird.
You see it, yeah, and you see it from the people's. I don't know if this has been your experience, but for me, it's like the people that I least expected to see that kind of stuff from.
Mm, mm,
It's the usual suspects, but then it's like, wait a minute, what? And so one thing I'll say this: my mom has been pretty careful. My mom lives in Florida, Central Florida, and she's like, oh yeah, we went golfing on this day, and golf is real. I would say golf is probably pretty safe. You're outside, you're spaced out from one another. I don't have an issue with that. But then she was talking about how they're going to visit somebody, and I'm like, you've been careful all this time, and you spent all these weeks talking about how you're staying home, and then you're talking about going to visit somebody, and she's like, I just can't do it anymore. She's like, I just can't. I got to get out of the house. I'm going crazy, and it's like, I guess that kind of draws the question out of at what point does it become what was the saying I heard used when the cure is more costly than I don't know. I can see that, I guess, but I don't know. It was one of those things where I was just kind of taken aback by it. I'm like, you've been careful for
mm.
all this time, and now you're talking about going to visit somebody. And I didn't give her a hard time about it, but there was a part of me that wanted to,
Yeah, well, it's someone you care about. You're like, I don't
Right,
want
right.
I don't want you to be affected by the problem or b contribute to the problem. And this is the thing that I've been telling my wife is like, look, I want to be wrong. Like, I'd love to be wrong.
Mhm.
This is one
Oh,
thing
yeah.
where I'm like, I would love it if it came out and I was wrong, even if people were like, because you know how people are now. It's like it's very much gotcha type,
Yep.
sympathy out there. It's like, aha, see,
Right.
nothing was wrong. We did all this
Yeah.
for nothing, and you're kinda like, but that's kind of what we were aiming for, was for nothing to be wrong.
Yeah, well, of course we want, right. Of course we want, no, it's the other side of that where it's like, no, no, no. See, this was a huge problem. And now all you guys who said it wasn't, I would rather be wrong about it being a nothing thing than to say it was nothing and then it turned out to be something. Obviously, the repercussions and the penalties for stuff like that is far more severe. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a quite a time, and trying to have people understand what's happening,
Yep.
or at least how it could affect people, and preemptively, anything preemptive is kind of odd, especially when you're talking about when it affects everybody. And
Mhm.
I think my wife's grandmother kind of put it really well. She's like, look, she's like wise beyond her years kind of grandmother. She's just kind of like, she's pretty conservative, but at the same time she actually listens to the other side of things too, and
Mhm.
tries
She's
to,
reasonable, level headed, right?
right, we'll meet you in the
Yep.
middle with an argument, even though she may have spouted off some weird shit earlier, right?
Sure.
um
Yep.
she kind of brought it to light. She was like, look, your parents' generation, my kids, pretty much, they've had their entire lives not being told what to do,
Mhm.
and they cannot stand to be told what to do because they've got what, depending on, your parents, let's just say between 50 and 60 years old right now, and they are now being told what to do, and it's really bugging them. I can see it
Mhm.
even in my own dad. He's just kind of like, I don't, this is dumb. This is so dumb. And it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
you've had free reign to do whatever you want, and now you're mad because you got to follow a few rules.
I read an article that was kind of in that vein where they were talking about the psychology around having to wear a mask. And one of the big reasons why people resist it is that they find that being forced to do something like that is unconstitutional. And it's like, I get it. I get that. But like, it's for your own safety, and you're not only looking out for yourself, but you're looking out for your family. You're looking out for your friends. You're looking out for your neighbor.
Hmm.
And I don't understand. I guess that's kind of the issue I have is, that perspective, be that as it may, why the concern for yourself and others doesn't outweigh that. For it doesn't have to be forever. Nobody's saying that this is going to be the precedent, that you have to follow. It's just for now. It's just something you just got to kind of suck up and do. And for me, I would rather just not go out than wear the mask. If I do have to go out, I will wear it. But I'm in a position where I'm lucky that I don't have to go anywhere. But yeah, to me, that's kind of the biggest issue I struggle with is, sure, it sucks. Nobody wants to do it. It's not fun. It's not comfortable. You're not used to doing it. It feels bad, but
Hmm.
just deal with it for now.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know. That's just my opinion.
and the constitutional thing is kind of, to me, is kind of a lazy fallback for a lot of people. It's like,
Hmm.
of course, I'm a big fan of the Constitution.
Yeah, sure.
I've had jobs and in my free time I do something that requires me to have free speech, right? So
Hmm.
it's of course very important to me. I do own guns. I'm a gun owner, but I don't have an arsenal like some people do.
Hmm.
But
You have a war chest.
right, it's important to me too, but I think it's a lazy fallback for people who are kind of like, I'm just upset that I have to do this thing, and so it's infringing upon my rights. And it's kind of like, well, you're not taking the time to understand the other side. The mask, look, we know, and you can stop drilling it home, folks. Like, we know that it's not 100% foolproof. It's going to stop everything. It's a
Hmm.
consideration for others around you, is what it
Right.
is.
Right.
It's showing people that I'm being considered. The fact, like yesterday, I had to go drop a box off at FedEx because it was something I had to send back, and I had to go to the actual location, and I put my mask on and I went inside. They even had signs that was like, we ask that you would please wear a mask when you come in. And if anything else, it's for me to be like, look, I respect you as someone working through this right now and having to
Right.
be out in this. I'm wearing a mask in here to hand you this box. And
Hmm.
and then, like, behind me, two three other people came in. No masks, no gloves, no nothing. They were just kind of like standing there, big ass signs asking, please, if you would wear a mask, and no one cares. And you could tell, you could tell it bugs people that have to be facing public at all times. Like that's the only time I had to be out in public and actually go see somebody that didn't live in my house.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a respect thing. It's just like you're respecting the existence of someone else is what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you think about this, and this is something that I don't know how old the policy is or the guideline, but like a restaurant, you can't go in without shoes on or without wearing shoes or a shirt. You can't do those things. It's accepted as a social norm, and it's for sanitary and health purposes. And why should this? It doesn't even have to be a permanent thing, but why should this be seen any differently?
Yeah, because there was a thing back in the day, and it's foot and mouth disease.
Right.
They had to stop that from happening. I'm sure at some point this conversation was had back whenever no shoes, no shirt, no service kind of thing kind of went into place. I'm sure there were people that are like, this is stupid. Who could tell me to wear shoes?
I feel unconstitutional.
It's unconstitutional. I feel emasculated wearing shoes in public.
If I want to go without a shirt on into Red Lobster, I want to be able to do it. Been doing it my whole life, you know?
There's been an
I wonder,
Go ahead,
it would be an interesting experiment. It would be an interesting experiment to see how people would react to somebody going in somewhere wearing a mask but no shoes on, into like a McDonald's or something like that for some carryout. Like, what would the reaction be if you're in that camp where you're like, oh, I don't want to wear a mask, whatever, and then somebody walks in next to you and they don't have shoes on at McDonald's, but they're wearing a mask. Like, I got a big problem with that guy not wearing any damn shoes. They're like, yeah, but he's got a mask on. Look at he's doing his part. No. I don't care about that. I don't care if he wears a mask or not, but that guy, he's got no shoes on.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy.
It's like, I don't want to see your feet. I'm sorry. I just don't want to see it. Like, say what you want. Like, I'm one of those people who's like, I will not wear sandals or flip-flops if I'm not at the beach or a pool kind of person,
Sure.
I'm just not. Have you ever like been sitting across from someone having a conversation, they kick their leg up, like they cross their leg, and they have like a flip-flop on and jeans, like a flip-flop and jeans, you're just kind of like, I can't look away from your dumb feet. I can't look away.
I don't. I have a reverse foot fetish.
Okay.
I don't like it. I just don't like looking at it. So I'm kind of with you on this. My brother-in-law is pretty much the worst at that because he's that guy that will wear the flip-flops with the jeans or the flip-flops just anywhere. And then he'll come over to the house and he'll take his flip-flops off and he'll put his feet up. And I'm like, I just can't even be in the room with you right now.
Your toes are talking to me and I can't not hear them.
Right. Yeah, it's just, So I've got what I call the reverse foot fetish.
Can't
stand it.
Yeah, it's just anti-foot fetish. It's weird.
It's a personal issue I take with other people's feet. I don't even look like looking at my own feet. Why do I want to look at somebody else's?
Exactly. Kind of like, how fast can I cover these up, please?
Right.
So on the lines of social media, I guess in the past couple of weeks, and there's people that I know that have shown concerns on both sides of this. There's a big, and it kind of falls under the freedom of speech kind of deal. It's the either taking down or labeling of what could be potentially dangerous information regarding all this. Like when someone has a video ranting about how, I'm a nurse in some town you never heard of, and our hospital hasn't had any cases at all, or we haven't been at capacity, or blah blah blah. And there's some people that are really upset that those can be labeled as, look, this doesn't fall in line with the guidelines put forth by most of this, organizations out there telling you to be safe. I don't know. Like, I don't think it's infringing upon someone's rights to put that out there if it gets labeled as, look, this is not falling in line with what the accepted procedures are for staying safe and stuff like that. I don't think that stuff should be completely taken down. But it's such a dangerous slope because with as much information as we have available to us and as much information as like our parents and our grandparents have available information too, I just said that too many times. There's also a lot of wrong information, and that's taken as gospel sometimes.
Yeah. It's and I think the issue for me sometimes too is that sometimes I wonder, you have to question sometimes whether or not the information is actually real in the first place,
Mm.
or if it's something else. And I think that's kind of, at this point, I think we're all kind of at some stage or another, we've encountered either an interaction or a piece of information, or we've seen something somewhere or read something where, like, I don't know what the intention is here. And, it's a shame that we're even having to call into question the legitimacy of some of these types of things, especially considering where they come from.
Well, it's the internet's made it more and more natural to be suspicious anyway, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
I need to be suspicious because I could go out and buy a pair of scrubs and a stethoscope, hang it around my neck, turn on my OBS, start recording a video, and say, "Look, I'm a doctor,
Dr. Lopez,
here in southern Georgia, and this thing isn't real. It's not going to affect you. You can go out and be safe."
Telling
and
you right now. Yeah, I'm a learned doctor. Just look at my costume. I'm a doctor. You can trust me.
You got the little circle mirror on top of your head. Like, it's wild because I could honestly do something like that and probably make it go semi-viral amongst a group of people if I did it the right way.
Yeah.
So
sure absolutely.
You call into question like everything you start seeing, and I don't think it's bad for people to put their experience out there. Like, if you're an actual nurse and you actually have to, you're dealing with this stuff and you're not seeing it. I get it. But again, it falls into what we talked about earlier. Yeah, you're not seeing it because you're not in an area that's being heavily affected. Like, go to New York City where 30,000 people have died. It's very different, a very different scenario. And then they have to have, makeshift morgues everywhere. It's kind of wild.
You ever see that movie Vantage Point?
No.
With Forrest Whitaker and Dennis Quaid, where they see it's a movie about an assassination. I don't remember what the country was. I saw it in theaters and I watched it a couple times, but I don't remember all the details of it. But basically the whole movie was about like the look of that everybody had of this assassination attempt, and everybody there, like one guy was like I think he was like a federal agent, or he was in law enforcement of some kind. And then there were some of the other people that were involved were onlookers, but basically the whole movie is about everybody's perspective on what happened, and it looks different from everybody's point of view. And so maybe it goes without saying, but yeah, to your point, of course it's going to look one way if you come from one spot, if you're in a more rural area, or if you're from an area that's less densely populated. It's gonna have a different, you're gonna have a different take on it. You're gonna say, well, we don't have anything going on here, it's not a big deal. And then somebody's like, oh, well, I live here and I can tell you right now, it's absolute pandemonium, and somebody else says, oh, that can't be right because I'm not experiencing that. Well, you need to widen your lens a little bit and think outside of just what's going on right in front of you. And I think people fail to do that with a lot of things, not necessarily just this, but, you can apply that problem to a lot of different things, but I think it's definitely a rampant issue when it comes to the current pandemic and the current state of things.
Yeah, it's the inability to be empathetic, right? Like, you can't place yourself in someone else's shoes, right? And it's kind of weird because you're kind of like, well, if this was affecting you, it would be the end of the world. My wife works in an industry where she has to deal with people that are probably going through the worst day of their lives. Property loss, stuff like that, and it's like
job loss,
and it's, especially with this, like, very much so people that are having their businesses affected by things shutting down. And I remember when she first started into this business, like, she was just kind of, I just don't want to lose my empathy for people because you deal with it on such a sheer number.
Get desensitized to that. So,
yeah, absolutely. And it's just kind of like, man, like, the inability to place your, like, the fact, and I told her, I was like, the fact that you're worried about this right now means that you really do care.
Oh, of course. Right.
And there are people who really don't. And I've actually read that some of that has to do with when people don't read that much, or when they don't read, like, even just fiction. Like, fiction helps your empathy muscle because it's forcing you into the head of another person and you're reading through their eyes, kind of thing.
Yep.
The inability, it's also the kind of the reason you feel different when you walk out of a movie sometimes, especially if you become really immersed in a movie and you feel weird when you walk out because you're kind of like, it's your brain readjusting to, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
looking through the lens of someone else's mind now. I'm kind of trying to readjust to real world. Or you walk out of a movie that's like, I don't know, a badass action movie. You walk out, you're like, man, I feel good. I feel
Yeah.
good.
I could go dodge bullets myself right now.
I'm gonna go jump off that building and just tuck and roll. I'll be fine.
Yep.
So,
You feel like you can do anything. I used to get that way with James Bond movies. I'm just like, I'm ready to go be a British secret agent myself. When I was a kid, I remember coming out of watching GoldenEye and like Tomorrow Never Dies. And I'm like, you know, I felt like I was Pierce Brosnan for a time.
yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, but I think people just that muscle just, especially over time, but I think especially now where you've got so much that's distracting you, it's more your opinion on things is more important to a lot of people than actually putting yourself in their shoes, and I think that affects a lot of folks.
Yep, agreed.
But who knows? Who fucking knows? Some of the things that me and you have been talking about lately is and it's probably changed a good bit since the last time. What I say? It was February of last year. February 2019 was the last time we got together and did a podcast.
Was it that long?
It was. I went and looked it up. I think it was February 4th, 2019.
That's wild. I had no idea. It's been over a year already.
It's kind of weird. And since then, we've actually gotten to hang out in person. We went to TwitchCon over last year, and it was a lot of fun.
Very good time.
We had a really good time. I laughed really hard.
Very memorable.
But I was kind of trying to like, and we've talked about it a good bit, so I know it's evolved a little bit. But your feelings toward the platform and toward how you approach it now, because you very much have turned to I'm playing whatever the fuck I want to play. I'm talking about what I want to talk about, and it's become a little more on your terms, it seems.
Very much so. At the time, I think when we last spoke on this, on the last episode we recorded together, I think I was in this position where I'm like, my sub count was consistently month over month getting higher and higher. Viewership was growing. I had been partnered for almost a year at that point, and a consistent 3-figure viewership. And it's one of those things where I'm like, man, this is really kind of gaining some traction. But even then, I think at that time too, I had just come off of like a recurring front page rotational, where I was on front page once a week for an hour, and I think I hit 10,000 viewers twice during that time, and then in the 8s and 9,000s both of the other days. And I think I was just kind of on this high where I'm like, man, this is kind of a thing where it was always going to be a hobby. It was never even at that point did I have this delusion of, oh yeah, maybe full time. Never once did that really enter my mind at any point. I was always pretty well grounded in where I stood on things, and kind of where I stood in the community in terms of, being a Dead by Daylight streamer, which is very much what I was at that time. I started feeling by that point, even after the whole front page month and all that stuff, that push that I had, I started feeling a little burnt out on the game. And I'm like, this isn't really what I imagined for myself, and getting into streaming Dead by Daylight was a happenstance anyway. It was one of those things where I saw a couple other streamers that I enjoyed watching. I'm like, yeah, it looks like a good time. Maybe I'll pick up the game. And it just so happened that I fell into streaming it by chance, not because it was a strategic decision to do so. So I kind of fell into it, and then I'm like, all right, I'm seeing growth. And like, it was the hobby of streaming wasn't just playing games and broadcasting. It was also this hobby and the feeling of growing something and nurturing something and finding a community and growing that community and finding like-minded people. And so I like that part of it too. And I knew that if I stopped streaming the same game, which was DBD at the time, that would change, And so there's a couple sides to it. There's one side where it's like, I'm growing and I don't want to stop that growth because growth feels good. 2, I know that if I stop playing this, I'm going to alienate some people that I enjoy having around to keep me company while I'm streaming. I enjoy that conversation. I know that when I stop doing this, I'm going to stop seeing those people. Not that it's necessarily a friendship, it's definitely more of a broadcaster viewer dynamic, but those people add value to your broadcast because of the banter and the things that come out of it and the interactions that come out of it. So there's that part of it too. But what's the trade-off? The trade-off is my satisfaction in what I'm doing. And that has other impacts and other implications as well. So that's where I stood in terms of content creation. Today, I'm very much doing just whatever I want. viewership has its kind of ups and downs. It depends on what game I'm playing. I played Zelda Breath of the Wild for about, I want to say it was just under 4 weeks. And I went back to, 100 plus viewers for, I would say, over 60% of those broadcasts. So it doesn't have to be the same game all the time. You're gonna mix things up a little bit, and you're gonna see some churn. You're gonna see people coming, you're gonna see people going, and then you'll see them back when you switch it up again. So there's definitely, it's a big conversation really to talk about variety versus single game, but it's been a good change for me.
Yeah, and you can see, I mean, just from meeting all the people we've met, sitting around talking to folks at TwitchCon, just talking to people casually online that pop in and out of your chat, you can tell when you're talking to another streamer, and you can tell when they are fatigued. Like the broadcast, especially right now when so many people are at home, there's a lot of people who have a little more time to stream, or, maybe have a little more time to view. And it's just kind of, you can see that fatigue set in on some people. You can see it in the way they tweet. You can see it in the way they interact with people. You can tell when they're into it and when they're not, like when they're enjoying themselves. And, after talking with you a little bit and stuff like that, I started to switch things up probably, I don't know, 6 months ago. And it was just kind of like, you know what? I just want to, I like this other game. I want to play this game more. And, you slowly move away from things, and just mentally it feels better. Like you were talking about, after a while it becomes, you're like, I like all these people that are around. I like having this interaction. But at some point, the game or the content becomes unenjoyable to you, because it becomes an obligation, right? And I think it's just so much healthier to just be like, you know what, let go of this and go into something else that you enjoy, and you can build that audience back up. But we also talked about this last time. We both do this as a hobby. We're not people who are making their living off of it, and that changes everything,
Yep, absolutely. I think if I had to rely on this to support myself and my family, boy, I would paint that smile on every night and fire up that Dead by Daylight, and you'd never hear me say a bad thing about it, just because your livelihood depends on it, But yeah, being that it is a hobby, you kind of have the power and the flexibility to just say, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm okay with a drop in subs, or I'm okay with a drop in viewership, or whatever the case is. You have the power to do that. I could burn this whole thing down and delete every one of these accounts and never look back, and literally nothing else outside of that changes. But you do it for the hobby of it, and you do it to have a good time, and you do it to connect with people. And I don't know. I think there's something to be said for having the freedom to do what you want. And I think some people who have, it's one of those things where you see this from people like Admiral Baru all the time, where he talks about, yeah, I've got a big stream community, and yeah, I'm doing this and that, but like, I don't leave the house. I miss people, and it's like there's a price to be paid, and there's a tax, so to speak, with literally everything. These successes in the streaming space take their toll on people. I think mentally and certainly physically, you start to see it a lot now too, where it's manifesting in strange ways that I think people didn't foresee. And I think the other thing that I want to mention on this too is something you and I have talked about separately as well, where you take something and you say, man, I would just look at how much fun it looks like to play games for a living. I want to do that. And it's like, well, you're forgetting that you're playing games as an escape from your day job, from the stresses of your day, whatever. This is your escape. When you take your escape and you turn it into your job, you don't have it as an escape anymore. And now when you walk away from the job, your escape, your recreation, that was your retreat. When you make that into a job and you're doing that all day, where are you going to go for that retreat now that you've turned it into a job?
Yeah, the escape becomes the trap.
Exactly. So, I mean, unless you are truly in love with it, through and through, it's going to eventually downstream become a problem,
Yeah, and there's very few people who have the luxury. Even there's a lot of people that take Admiral Baru, like you brought up, as an example. They're like, he can play whatever he wants, and he's got, blah blah blah. It's like, that must be awesome, and to an extent, it's awesome. But like you said, you've even heard him say, "I miss people. I miss actual people." Yep.
Right.
And the amount of work that's put into something like that, I can't imagine. Like, I know it's built up over time, but that's many, 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 many thousands of hours of.
Oh, he's in him particularly, he's been at this for a long time too. You know, I mean, it takes years to cultivate that. Um, and he's not the only one. You hear it from a lot of different people, but yeah, it's at the end of the day, it all has a price of some kind, you know?
Well, and you're not only fighting upriver against yourself, right? And your mental health and your, just your mental satisfaction of the whole thing. It's an ever evolving door of new people showing up to the platform all the
Right.
time. There's just a constant, someone just decides to turn on a camera and start streaming one day. And then now that's a person who, for lack of a better word, is competition if you're in it for a living, right? You don't want to lose your people to someone new, but the natural inclination for humans is to, okay, time to switch it up. Variety, just go change it up. Even if I'm watching the same game, to hear a different voice, and I, obviously I've been doing it for a while. You've been doing it for a good while and at different levels. And, people float in and out. And then you'll see them, you'll be like, man, I haven't seen so-and-so in a while. And then you happen to pop into another chat and they're there, and it's just what people do, right? They want to change it up every once in a while. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
But it's that you're fighting that stream at all times.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly true. I think one of the issues too that I've had, not only in my own content, but even like just within the space, people that I watch regularly or used to watch regularly, now it just, my preferences and my taste in what I'm watching is changing, and sometimes I'll be honest with you, lately, I think it's partially because of just my work day has just been a little bit different since this whole situation started and the nature of what I do. But, there are days where I'm like, man, I'm really looking forward to streaming tonight. I have no interest in watching anybody else though, and I think it has more to do, the more I think about it, the more I think that has to do with kind of my day job, and just the way my day looks now. But there are times where I'm like, man, I really look forward to streaming myself and I look forward to making content, but I don't really want to watch anybody else right now, and you just kind of go through that and you go through, I used to love watching so-and-so, but now it just feels like I'm tuning into the same episode of the same TV show every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I want something else. And it's like, I get excited when so-and-so does something else, but then nobody else comes and then they feel defeated and they go back to falling into what works for them. And it's just it's a weird cycle, man. I mean, there's all, you could strip it down and look at the psychology at all of it, of the experience from a viewer standpoint and what it does over time to the broadcaster. And it's interesting, and I'm not qualified to really speak on any of it, but you can look at it on the surface and you can pick out a bunch of things for yourself just using common sense. But it's wild, man.
Well,
really is.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is the amount of information for people who want to grow on the platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
They think that. And I was in this for a while. You feel like you have to get in if you raid somebody or if you host somebody, like I need to sit here for 20 minutes or I'm a bad person if I just show up, drop people in here and leave. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some people, and I felt like this for a while, like, all right, I need to make my rounds today. I need to spend this much time in this person's channel, need this much time in this person's channel.
You want to be seen supporting, right? Like,
absolutely.
From a business standpoint, it's good. It's good. It's kind of good business to interact in that way. Sure.
And I've just gotten away from that. It's like, if I've got time to watch, I'll have somebody up in the background, but most of the time it's on mute. And, I've got my some close friends that I'll stop by and watch because they happen to be maybe streaming while I'm working and I'm sitting in front of a computer anyway. Yeah, right. But I've got some really good friends that pop into my channel all the time and that I even talk to in real life that I just don't get to go by their channel just because, hey, once work's over, that's most of my screen time unless I'm streaming.
Right.
And it's making peace with that, because I think there's a lot of people who overstretch themselves mentally just trying to keep up with that end of things, not even the end that matters, which is the creating of content and putting out what they want to put out, but they get caught up in the I need to be here and see this person just so they know I'm here kind of thing.
The whole networking game to it it's kind of disgusting to me in some ways. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's because of my life experiences and my age and the way I've been raised or whatever, however you want to look at it or whatever it may be. But I have a big problem with networking because most of the time it's just this superficial, hollow bullshit. And I just don't have any interest in that. And it's probably just because I just don't have time for it. And I don't have any skin in the game, you know?
Right.
And I think that that probably has something to do with it just as much. But for me, I have a big problem with like disingenuous interactions with people. Like if it's not meaningful and it's not something that I genuinely take interest in, or that the person that I'm interacting with has a genuine interest in me and who I am as a human being and what I'm doing or whatever, like it's not really worth either of our time, you know?
Mm.
And I know that's not how it works, you know, that's not really what it's about. It's about helping each other grow and all that stuff. But for me, it's like I don't really have time for anything other than what, you know, something meaningful, you know.
Yeah.
If a viewer casually reaches out to me and asks a question, I'm always happy to talk to somebody. But you know who your friends are, and I don't really, yeah, I've always struggled with that part of this, even on social media and stuff. Like I try to post my content if I like it. If I don't think something's good, then I don't put it out there because I don't want to waste somebody else's time with it, clutter up somebody else's timeline, or you know, I don't ever want to put out a false version of who I am or what I represent or what I believe in. It's always, if it's from me, it's sincere, you know, and it's you know, and you can see through other people when it's not on their end, and it's, I don't know, it just creates this weird dynamic when you start to see a lot of that from people, you know.
Yeah, and something that's along those lines that's been on my mind lately is, um, I'm trying to figure out how to really word it. It's maybe thinking you have a relationship with a broadcaster or even a viewer that is just simply not what you think it is. Like it's
Mhm.
like kind of a version of he's just not that into you kind of thing, you know?
Sometimes it's a two-way street too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, I even like something that takes up a lot of my mental time because I don't have that big of a viewership, but I have a very, I've got a group of people that are very,
Tight-knit community.
yeah, they're avid about being there, and
Yeah.
they show up in other people's chats that I'm friends with and stuff like that. If I don't see somebody for a while, like I think about that, and I'm like, I hope they're doing okay,
Yep.
and to have the realization that that maybe you feel like you watched a lot of hours of a person, or you feel like you've got a connection with a person, and then you kind of think about it over time. You're kind of like, maybe I don't, like sometimes where you're kind of like, maybe it's just not as important to them as it is to me, or
Yeah.
maybe I try to make sure I'm not doing that to someone else, because you can tell when a person's really all about what you're putting out there, and you want to make sure that you're kind of like, I want to at least let them know that I appreciate that, and not, I don't know, am I coming across clear or not? I have no idea.
You are, and I can give you a good example of this, how it happened to me. The whole reason why I even know about Twitch in the first place, well, actually, it was Justin TV back in those days. I knew of the platform when it was Justin, and I had an account, and I would linger around and just kind of watch people. But what really got me into Twitch was a broadcaster named Day9. And that was back when I was really into StarCraft, and he was putting out all this educational learning content on the game and strategy and tips on how to play and all that stuff. And he has this very charismatic personality. He's just really kind of fun to watch and very articulate, well-spoken guy. And those are the types of things that really I enjoy. Um, I've been watching him ever since. This was 10 years ago. I found him when he was streaming on a different platform. I want to say it was on a live stream, maybe. I don't remember where it was, but I found him there. He came over to Twitch, and I've been for a long time. I didn't even use my account. I just had his channel bookmarked in my browser, and I would just click on his channel, and I wouldn't chat. I would just kind of hang out. And he's actually the first actual Twitch partner, as it were. It was, I think, him and maybe Man versus Game who were the first people who had sub buttons on their channel. This was when the platform was in its infancy, but I've been watching him for 10 years, and I met him in person for the first time last year at PAX East. And it was weird because I feel like I have this, I'm like, and I said this to him, and we kind of laughed about it, but I said, it's weird, man. I was like, I don't know if you experienced this because you've been doing this for so long. I said, but I feel like I've known you for 10 years
Mm.
and I'm a complete stranger to him, and so to kind of speak to what you're talking about, I kind of articulated that to him, and he's like, no, I totally get it. I get it. I hear this all the time. And he was just really wonderful to talk to. But he was like, no, I've heard that so many times from so many different people. And it's like, you feel like you have this relationship with somebody because you've learned so much about them, because it's this one way door that you walk through and you get all this information, but the other person doesn't go walk through it to see you. You're not receiving you're not giving them anything back. And so we talked about that dynamic a little bit, and it was a brief, but it was an interesting conversation about that. But yeah, so anyway, long story long, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and you get a lot of experience with that in podcasting and radio too, where
Mhm.
like you're just listening to a show daily, right? Maybe on your
Right.
drive to work, you've got a 1 hour commute, you listen to the same morning show for years, and
Mhm.
you get to know, all the characters, what's going on in their lives, because
Right.
that's all you have when that's your job on the radio. You sit there and you just start sharing shit, and it's the same
Yeah.
way in a podcast. I've always joked that people who avidly listen to my show probably know more about me than my parents, because they just listen to every little nuance about what's going on in my life, what's concerning me, what I think is silly and funny and stuff like that. Um, yeah, it perfectly translates over to Twitch, and it is that one way of just like, man, I feel like I know you because I've heard so many hours of your voice going directly into my ears,
Hmm.
and they're like,
Collectively, over the years, you get bits and pieces of information about them, who they are as a human being,
mhm.
and you put all that together collectively over time, over years, and it's like I've amassed this huge amount of information about who you are as a person, and I know all of this about you, and you know my name and your channel, and that's it.
Yeah,
You know?
it's 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 very odd. It really is.
Yeah.
But I think about that a lot. Like I'm just kind of like, man, I know that there are broadcasters that are very open about being like, look, I'm like, and I've heard it before. I am not your friend. Like it's kind of one of
Mhm.
those things. There's people who go at it like that too. It's like, look, I broadcast, but I'm not your friend, kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm here to entertain you. We're not personal. If you want to sub to me, you do so with that understanding, you know.
And that's very much so a broadcast personality quirk for some people. I met
Mhm.
plenty of people in TV and radio that have felt the same way. I was like, no, this is my job, and you are the viewer, and that's it. And it's kind of like, that's just not how I am personally. Like, I guess it takes
Mhm.
a special personality type to be like that. But I did a podcast a couple years ago with a guy who used to have a really big show in Atlanta, on the radio. And I was like, at the top of the thing, I was like, hey, I just want to say, I really appreciate your contribution to what you've done in the show. And I think you're a wonderful broadcaster. And he was just kind of like, I just want to say thanks, because he'd been off the air for a little while at this point. He's like,
Mhm.
first of all, thanks, because I realized that I heard those kinds of things all the time, but you start hearing it so much that you're just kind of like, it becomes something that you're numb to, right?
You're desensitized to it. The
A-
more you're exposed to something, right, the less interesting it becomes.
And at this point, he'd been off the air for over a year. So, I mean, out of sight, out of mind, right? So you stop hearing
Mhm.
those things. So he's like, now I'm trying to go out of my way to make sure I say thank you to people who do that, and to be like personally thank them, because I heard it for so long that it just didn't mean anything to me anymore.
Let me ask
Um,
you a question, and I'm interested in your perspective on this because of your experience as well. Do you find that the more elusive people tend to be, or the people who like to keep their audience at arm's reach as opposed to being a little bit more accessible, do you find that there is more interest, or do you believe that there would be more interest in general, or a longer lasting interest in that person because of that distance that they sort of create between them and their audience?
100%. Leave them wanting more. It's supply
Yeah.
and demand. It works the same with personalities. Like, just like it
Mhm.
does with a product. Like, everybody wants a fucking Nintendo Switch right now, right? Like, everybody's
Right.
looking for those
Because you
things
can't get it.
because you
Yeah.
can't get it. It was like that it's been like that with every console at some point, but it's the same way with a personality. People want to
Mhm.
know more, and then when you pull back, it creates more intrigue. The best way to get your audience to ask you a question is tell them not to ask you that question, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I've even titled my stream like that sometimes, like, don't ask me about the water heater. You know,
Yeah.
the
The
first thing
first
people
thing
do is
somebody's
come
going to
in.
ask about is, right, what's going on with the goddamn water heater, right?
Yeah, and so it's funny too, because you can even play that to your strength of like being like, no, I'm not going to tell you about it. It's something that is bugging me, and I'm not going to talk about it today. The water
Mhm.
heater pisses me off, and then you slowly start leaking the information out to them. It's really fun to do, and I don't know. I think it works that way with people who are like someone that you and I both love, Fudge, right?
Mhm.
part of his intrigue is the fact that you don't know what he looks like. He's very secretive online. He's, and that's the persona he puts out there.
Right.
And I think that that's definitely kept a lot of people's interest, and I do have to say, by the way, like he actually gave me permission to use one of his songs as my intro. That was him that did that. And
yeah, he's great. He's great.
He's really good. Like, you should check him out. Spuntastic on Bandcamp for everybody listening. Like, he's got a couple of really, really good albums out. And
he's a talented guy.
He's very talented. He's very talented. And I've had some pretty cool conversations with him. I'm trying to get him on the podcast. I know he's working on that. So maybe one day we'll have Fudge on here. But he's a guy from Germany, and he's brilliant, and he has great conversation. I think that honestly he could, and he's been doing it lately. He could just do talk show on Twitch and just talk about movies or whatever the fuck's on his mind, because he's got such an interesting aspect. But I think that what helps him out greatly is his anonymity. And, I think that that's definitely something that he can play to his advantage, or that he does play to his advantage, whether he's doing it intentionally or not. Some people are doing it to be safe, to be like, I don't want you knowing anything about me. They understand that supply and demand.
Yep.
But do you feel like you tread the line of keeping certain things back from your audience?
No, I mean, I've always been pretty accessible, I guess. If anybody asks a question, I answer it honestly. There are very, very few things that I would say are off limits. Obviously personal details and stuff like that. There's just a point where you draw the line there, but for the most part, I'm willing, whatever people want to talk about, like my channel, I've always tried to keep like a, it's like a bunch of friends just kind of sitting on the couch playing games together, and so really with that, that dynamic, really just about any conversation is acceptable, in my opinion.
I think that has a similar effect too, that holding things back has. Like, if you're an open, honest person, I think while it may not grab the same type of people, because there's some people who are just drawn to the intrigue, the mystery of who this person is. There's people who are just as drawn to, this person is going to shoot straight with me. They're gonna be honest about what's going on and how they feel about stuff. There's things I've talked about on my podcast and on my stream and even on the radio that I know a lot of people that wouldn't be comfortable just throwing that out there. So I kind of run my channel in a similar way to you, where it's just kind of like, you ask me a question, I'm probably going to answer it. Like, it's unless it's
very
something,
few things are off the table, right?
Yeah, unless it's like incredibly personal. Like, I don't like. To me, it's better to get it out there because it doesn't bother me, and because I feel like sometimes being honest with some people about especially certain subjects, helps them maybe even emotionally deal with whatever the subject might be.
Yeah, I can see that. Yep, definitely.
It's fucking wild, man. It really is. It's a weird. I try to think about the amount of hours of whatever content I might have put out there adds up to, and I don't even know. Like, I tried to do it for a month. Like, when I did a couple of years ago, I did Podvember, and I did a podcast every day for the entire month of November. And
that's a lot.
and the only rule I had was it had to be at least an hour long. Some of them were 3, some of them were an hour and a half, whatever. But I totaled that up, and I was just kind of like, man, that's a lot. And I'm talking about, this is episode 351. I've put a lot of my life out there, and you can't, regardless of how secretive you are, like, it's just like knowing, I don't know if you've ever seen, like, there's movies and documentaries about, prison and stuff like that, where the inmates slowly over time, just listening to whoever, the warden or the guards might be, have put together a picture of a person's life, and it's just like what you were talking about,
Yeah.
You kind of piece all that together.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I've been recently, so I barely have time to stream sometimes, but what I've been trying to do is Twitch drops off, even for partners, Twitch drops off your VODs after a certain number of days, and they're just going to go on forever. I'm assuming they catalog them or archive them in some way. They're probably still out there, and you could probably get them by request, maybe. But what I've been doing is not only to increase exposure for my channel, but to also just kind of preserve everything. I've been taking everything and putting it on YouTube. So I've been doing that very faithfully for probably about, I would say probably about 2 months now. And so the last 3 games that I've completed on stream, you can watch the whole thing on YouTube. And this isn't really a plug, but it's really more of just kind of a reflection on what you're saying is, you're putting everything out there piece by piece. And it's like, man, I've put out like, I don't know, 80 or 90 hours worth of content over the past couple of months, which for me is a lot. It may not be a lot for some, but for me it is. And looking back on that and looking at all the different videos and looking at, everything that's kind of happened and what we've been talking about, it's really been, it's almost been since the pandemic has started.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, and so kind of looking back on some of those things and how some of the conversations and the nature of things change in your chat and the way your interactions are with people, how they evolve a little bit based on what's going on out there in the world. And the longer that lasts, what kind of impact is that having, and who are you starting to not see, and what's happening for everybody else. It's kind of interesting to see that, I guess, at the very least from a posterity sake.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about the things you say sometimes where you're like, maybe just an opinion about something pops out and you're kind of like, how many people did I just, how many people hit the X?
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I know what you mean, because Twitch keeps track of, all of your analytics, how many hours you've streamed, all that stuff. So sometimes you look at that and I'm just kind of like, am I proud? Am I am I ashamed?
I'm actually kind of curious now. You mentioned how much streaming you've done. I'm kind of curious about myself now. I'm pulling up my own dashboard here just out of curiosity. How much I've streamed. I've been streaming more lately because I feel like I've been, I also noticed this too, because I've been enjoying what I've been doing more on stream. I'm streaming for longer. Like I'm wanting to stay live longer, and that's actually that's one thing that I've noticed that's been a big change for me since I've switched to like single player games.
Yeah, it's I mean, you're getting the enjoyment of it. It's not like a clock watching thing, right? You kind of, I've had more, so since switching away from Dead by Daylight and doing more hunt and doing more, a variety type stuff throughout the week, I've had more instances where I've looked over and been like, oh fuck, it's past 11. Like it's, where you're like, oh shit,
sleep.
Yeah, I got to get some sleep just so I can function tomorrow. Not because I want to leave, but because, you try to keep your times, right? You got life to schedule around this thing too.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, even looking at your hours, not even just streamed, but going through your game library and being like, oh Jesus, that's a lot of hours. I could have been doing something else, but like, keeping it in perspective of like, I was also building relationships with people and stuff like that. So when you see a few thousand hours in a game, let's say, you're kind of like, oh, that's yikes.
Yeah, I've streamed since March 1st. I've streamed 161 hours, which for me is a lot. I think that's probably very little for some. That's probably maybe half for some, but I think for people with full-time jobs like us, that's kind of a lot. I mean, I've got a family too, so kind of speaks to, I think, the feeling of freedom and kind of the level of enjoyment you have with creating content when it's around something that you're enjoying and you're appreciating more.
I'd almost be interested to see what those hours look, the same amount of days look like when you were in flux about your enjoyment of what you were doing, when you were kind of in that transition period of like, I need to get into something I like more. I'm betting it was a good amount less.
Yeah, if I look at February through, let me look at like the same time period last year. If I look like February through, let me see what my time stream looked like from the same period last year. Looks like it would be about, sorry, it's not updating.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's got a little bit of a difference because, you don't have those 15, 20 minutes here and there that you go over, or even 30 minutes sometimes. And it just adds up over time if you're enjoying yourself.
Yeah. Twitch is broken. It doesn't let me update my analytics to see that span of time, but I'm sure it was less. And I think I was going to say, one of the things I think that kind of really opened my eyes to what I was doing and how it wasn't, how DBD was not really working for me anymore, was like when I would find myself looking at the clock, wondering when I'm done. That's kind of an ugly realization to come to. It's like, man, I like, if I'm looking to be done, like if I'm reaching kind of for the end,
when you're
That's a
clock
problem.
watching. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah, that's a problem.
you can see that in bigger broadcasters too, where they're kind of like, when it hits their scheduled time to be out, they're like, all right, guys, we're gonna get out of here. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
They're just gone, and it's just kind of
Right.
like, okay,
Right.
yeah, you could tell that they were just ready to go.
Yep.
And then you
For
have
sure.
some, even those same broadcasters where you look down and you're like, holy shit, they've been streaming for 11 hours at this point. And
Yeah.
it's just, I guess it just depends on how you're feeling, but I could absolutely see where once you're enjoying and changing it up a little bit, how you could
Lose
get
yourself,
into more
man.
hours. Yeah, lose yourself.
Was it Tim the Tap Man, I think, said recently too. He's like, man, he's like, I remember when I used to like this game, and it's like, this is a guy who's making millions of dollars. It's a different perspective, and it just kind of proves like humans, we're all sort of prone to the same sort of things where it's like at some point, you got to draw the line with something. At some point you got to step away from what it was that you've done that may have gotten you somewhere really, really great, because it's ran its course.
Well, and Tim the Tap Man, me and you have talked about him a couple times where he's one of those guys. He's not necessarily really my type of broadcaster that I watch
Mhm.
regularly.
He's
But
got a lot of energy, and watching somebody with that amount of energy, it physically exhausts me.
I
Not that I'm bad, it's just,
absolutely, but
I don't know.
I don't. I'm not interested in any of the games he streams. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't interest me at all. But I will if I look over, because I do follow him. If I look over and see he's doing just chatting, to me that's the best part, and that's similar for a lot of the bigger streamers I watch too, because that's the part you can't replicate. Like I can play a game and commentary and have commentary on it all day
Mhm.
long, but the thing you can't replicate, and the thing even a stream as small as mine that I see more interaction with people on, is when I'm doing like a just chatting. So I'm just sitting around
Yeah,
talking about what's on my mind. You get way more people talking to you than when you're zoned in on a game and
yeah,
trying to play. No
for
matter
sure.
how good you are at talking to your chat while it's going on, but I'll always at least click over and see what he's talking about, or just to. He has such a way of making funny his chat insulting him the entire time, which to me is
It's a gift.
hilarious. It's a, it's
Yeah,
a gift. It really is. But yeah, he did comment, like he was watching a video. I guess it was like a compilation video of like highlights from a bunch of different streamers that included him in
yeah,
Fortnite. Right? It was Fortnite. And he said, "Yeah, I remember when we had fun playing this game." And
yeah, that's what it was. That was the quote. Yep.
it was very longing too. You could see it. He's like, "Man, we used to have so much fun." And it's just
Yeah.
like, well, you're just implying that you're just having a terrible time now.
Yeah, right. I mean, and it was bound to happen at some point,
hmm
you know?
I think it happens at all levels, and obviously some are better equipped to deal with that than others, because you can see just over time you start following other streamers that are your similar size, or maybe a little bigger, maybe a little smaller,
Mhm.
and at some point or another you see where they're just kind of like, "Hey guys, I'm going to take a mental break. I think I've just been focusing too much on this and not enough on myself." And
Are you seeing it more now than you used to?
definitely,
A lot
definitely,
more, right?
a ton
I
more.
think
But
that's
I think it has to do with the time period, right? You can almost pin how long that person's been streaming. Like, I bet this guy's roughly around a year of streaming hardcore like that, or roughly around 2 years, or whatever it is. But I think more so now because a lot of people are home.
could be. I think I kind of attribute it to being more like I'm sorry, your single game streamers,
Mm.
where, you get so many hours in or so many years in on a certain game, and sort of that clock winds down, and you've just kind of had it, and I kind of dipped my toe in the Tarkov directory for a while, because I just really genuinely enjoyed playing it a lot. I was terrible at it, but I had a good time with it.
Mm.
And I started following a lot of other Tarkov streamers, and actually I started watching Tarkov years ago, so it's not necessarily a new thing, but I found more streamers in the directory when I started streaming myself. No, I think that's a pretty natural thing for it to happen. But um couple people in the Tarkov directory that have been streaming it faithfully for years now, since it was, it's been in beta for 3 years now, 4 years, 5 years. I forget how long it is, but people have been playing it since it started. You're starting to see them, they gain some success, and they gain a larger following. They're putting out YouTube content around it. They're streaming it every day for 6 to 8 hours a day. And then you start to see it, and it's like, the clock has been ticking, and it's the bell is rung for it now, and it's like,
Mhm.
man, I've loved this and I've been having a good time and I've really found a lot of success and I appreciate everything, but fuck, man, I am just done. I'm
Yeah.
just like, I need a break. And, then it's like, you don't, do you get that permission from your community to take that break? Do you say, do you get your folks saying, yeah, sure, go ahead and play what you want. Just don't expect me to be here to watch it. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. You look down and you're like, when did this handcuff get here? Like, what the fuck
right,
just happened? Like,
right.
it's wild. And I think part of that as well becomes the more you play that, the more zeroed in on it you are. And you see this in the Dead by Daylight community. Sweaty's a bad word, but like the more competitive people get, there's kind of like, no, like I've got so many hours, I'm better than getting caught in this chase, or I'm better than,
Yeah.
and they really are hard on themselves about it. Like that's the one thing I was talking to my chat the other day and they were kind of like, you never rage at a game. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't. Like it doesn't bother me because I approach it in the fact that I'm playing a game. Like, who cares?
It's a video game. Who
Right.
gives a shit?
You know, I've brought people on, like, so I play a lot of Hunt Showdown now, and that can be, you can play that by yourself. It's a little more fun to play with a partner, or even two partners. And I've had people who I've brought, because I'll just bring, usually if I know you long enough and I know you've got the game, there's a good chance I'll ask you to come in and play sometime. And, I've had people who are viewers that got to play, and they afterwards would be like, I'm really sorry, I'm so bad, man. Like, I appreciate you having me on, and I just hate that I sucked today, and I got killed a couple times. I was kind of like, I don't give a shit. Like, it doesn't bother me,
Right.
But I think people who slip into that competitive side of it too, I think that's doubly taxing on their brain, because not only are they stuck playing the same game all the time in their eyes, they're also giving themselves a hard time because maybe they had a bad fucking night, and so now they're doubly tired of what they're doing. And
I think there's
weird.
also there's this expectation that because somebody broadcasts a game with any type of regularity, that there's a certain bar that you have to live up to in order to be respected or seen as as an equal of. I don't know. I might be reaching with this a little bit here, but I think there's definitely some sort of expectation that people put on themselves, like, oh, a streamer is letting me play with them, and it's like, you have to remember, like, not all, just because somebody streams, it doesn't, and even if they're a popular streamer, that doesn't mean they're the best at anything. In some cases, like if you're talking about like a Shroud, somebody like that, yes, then in that case maybe you're watching the best. But a lot of streamers, they're broadcast personalities. That doesn't mean they're the best. And so I think people forget that.
Yeah, I think so. Like, they feel like, oh my god, if I don't play up to snuff, this is going to be like, and it's easy to feel that way, right? So I'm hanging out in another streamer's chat, and I decide to jump in and play some Hunt Showdown with her, and all of a sudden, I mean, someone we both know, Geef Allen, is in chat, and for some reason he decides to jump in for a couple games. Immediately, like, I get tense because I know he plays it a lot. He's a bigger streamer, but I don't know. Like, I can see how someone could get way in their head about it, because I got slightly in my head about it. Even though, who cares? I've hung out with Geef before. I know he's not going to judge me on my gameplay, but I can see how that could be really stressful for someone. Being like, oh shit, I'm in here with this person who's got so many people that watch him, and it gets weird, I'm sure.
I had a similar type of thing happen. It's similar in the whole being a streamer at the time. There was an expectation that when I was playing Tarkov, I was part of the whole drops program that they did back in, I forget when it was, January, the beginning of January, end of December. It was a shorter list of streamers, and I was on that list. And so my channel was drops enabled, and I had people coming in that I hadn't seen before, and they were asking me questions. I'm like, okay, we need to put a pause on this right now, because if you have an expectation of skill level, I said, I haven't been playing this that long. And I don't take it super seriously. So I'm like, if you're looking for a sweat lord at this game, somebody who's going to be optimizing their route and optimizing their gear and doing this or that the best way, I'm like, you're in the wrong channel. Like, you're welcome to hang out. I said, but this channel is community centric. It's not game centric. The game is a backdrop for everything else. I was like, so if you're expecting high-end results, I was like, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, it's I've definitely, especially since playing Hunt Showdown, obviously when you switch a directory, right? When you switch to a new game, you start meeting new like people. You said, new people, new streamers.
Right.
And when you do that and they find out you're a streamer, I mean, especially when it's a smaller directory, there's less options. So there's a good chance you get hosted, rated, people just being like, hey, I'm done. So I'm going to dump you off on this guy I met the other day. And I've had a couple of bigger hunt streamers drop people in, and they're really good at the game, right? And I'm just kind of like, hey, I am the opposite of who you just came from. Just so you know, I am not that good. So be prepared for some really forehead plays, and be prepared for just me to be sitting back and enjoying the game, because I haven't gotten that good at it. And so I try to prepare people just like you did. It's like, you're not going to come here and find someone who's going to be pissed that they got killed. Like, people pop in sometimes, they're like, oh, what's your kill death ratio? And I'm like,
who cares? I don't know.
I don't fucking know. Like,
right.
And I've got a joke where it's just kind of like, I'll be like, I don't think that's important. I think, just having fun. And I was like, this is also something that people who are really bad at the game say, but
stir the pot a little bit.
Right. It's just kind of like lean into it, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Like, you can see that fatigue on broadcasters that focus on the one game and get really competitive
for a long time. Yep.
Yeah.
Wears people down for sure.
It does. And I think that there's nothing wrong with taking a break, and I think the people who matter in your channel and that are around you and know what you're all about, they're going to want you to be okay.
Well, and how much of it is perception control too? Because if you think about this, our currency, it's a sad reality. But your worth as a broadcaster in the eyes of many other broadcasters, I'm not going to say everybody, but because that's certainly not true, but your value or your currency or your weight in the streamer world is your viewership. Oh, so and so's got X number of viewers today. Oh, so and so is a regular 1,000 to 1,200 person viewer type of guy. That's the type of channel they have. They're bigger than me. And you judge somebody's value on the platform by that. I mean, I guess it's fair to say from like a marketing standpoint that would be factual, but how much of it is perception control? Like, as you say, oh, I'm going to switch over to this directory, I really want to play this game, and your viewership drops. Am I worried about how other people are going to look at, like, me personally? I don't give a shit, right? I don't care if I have 100 people, 150 or 10 people, like lately I've been playing a game that has a little bit, like I've been playing Link's Awakening, which honestly has been wonderful. It's the lowest amount of viewership I've had in a long time, but that didn't really, I'm kind of past that, I don't really care about that. But like, how much for a full timer, somebody who's relying on this for their income, so on and so forth, if you drop down and all of a sudden your currency is lower and your value or your perceived value is lower because, oh, so and so used to stream to 1,000 people, but now they only stream to a couple hundred because they're playing this game. What kind of partnerships or what kind of relationships do you have with other people? How much are those going to be strained? Is it going to impact things over the longer term? You certainly see that when you jump directories, just from a directory standpoint. Like when you switch from, like for me, for example, when I switch from Dead by Daylight to literally anything else, you don't get hosted by DBD streamers because it's like, oh, this isn't the same type of content. So I'm not going to, it's either I'm not going to put my viewership into into a directory that isn't where we are now because it's a break in the experience.
Right.
Or B, I'm not going to host this person because they don't stream the game that I'm streaming anymore, and therefore I can't get anything out of them. And that's kind of a very blunt way to put it, and maybe a little bit coarse, but that's the reality. Let's not bullshit each other, right? We both know that. That's the way people think. So how much of it, I guess, would be perception control, and controlling how much of your value you have or don't have by maintaining that number and pushing yourself to stay in that directory for that reason.
Well, and I've been in chats where, maybe the viewership was lower on a person who's typically higher, and people will literally come in and be like, whoa, the other day you had 500 people in here. Now you only have 100. What's going on? Everything all right?
Obnoxious question.
Yeah. And I don't think, and I think most of the time, more times than not, people don't realize that's a rude question. Like they're genuinely asking you that, but at the same time, it's kind of still a blow to the ego where you're like, well,
yeah, sure it is.
Yeah. And I think that currency holds a lot of weight. I think it does, but I think it's because the platform has made it such subconsciously.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And because, it's all a business in the end. They're interested in the people who are going to bring eyes. Now, I have noticed I don't know if you have, but that the UI has changed recently
Yeah.
for Twitch.
I-
And I went into a directory and I noticed that now it's kind of varied. Like it's not organized anymore from, or at least when I clicked into this one directory, I think it might have been Dead by Daylight just to see who was doing things, or maybe it was Hunt.
you recommended.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird. It wasn't sorted by most viewers to least viewers. It was like there was a person here with 20 people watching next to a person with 4,000 people watching next to a person with 40 people watching. It's kind of weird.
Hmm.
So I don't know if they're trying to maybe break that a little bit, or if it's just kind of a more so them kind of tossing, a crumb to everybody who has complained about that.
I'd like to see them get rid of viewer count altogether.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. That'd be a
I
great
would love to see
experiment.
that.
Like do it for a month and see what happens,
Hmm.
because there are so many people who are driven to, I want to see someone play this game. Okay, this is the first person here, so I'm gonna click on him. I mean,
Right.
visibility. We've talked about this for years. Visibility
Mhm.
is so big.
Yeah, it's everything. Yeah, and I mean, if you got rid of that number, that that's okay. So it's like the restaurant situation. It's the confirmation, the social proof, right? That we look for. It's saying, oh, X number of 100, 100 or so people are watching this channel. Therefore, they must be good, right?
Mm,
1,000 people are watching this person. Therefore, they must be worth watching, right?
mhm.
And so the platform has created this system where your value and your worth as a streamer is directly tied to how many people are watching at any given time, regardless of because whether something's good or not, and this isn't, I'm not just talking exclusively to streams. It could be a TV show or a movie or, whatever. It doesn't matter how many people have consumed that content. It doesn't, that you don't need a large number of people to have consumed it in order for it to be good. And so the platform has really done everybody, not just small broadcasters, but literally anybody at all, a huge disservice by making things accessible in that way based on the number, because the number can be artificially inflated. We've seen a number of broadcasters over the years rise by artificially inflating their numbers for exposure and then pulling that out, and now they've got real numbers because they've pushed themselves up with artificially.
Yeah.
So you cheat the system in that way, and I think that's less of a prevalent problem now. I mean, it's still there, it still exists for sure, but it's less so, I believe. And so I think if you get rid of the number, then and you let people, and you let maybe design an algorithm to recommend streams based on your viewing preferences, like
Yeah.
that might be better for everybody.
Well, I mean, you even see it, like you can take even Twitch out of the mix, right? Like, I don't know. A lot of people obviously are on Netflix. If you bump around now, they've got this thing that's called like the top 10,
Mhm.
the top 10
Yeah.
in America right now. And I'm just kind of
Right,
like,
right.
in my head, I'm just kind of like, well, wait a minute. This was completely different than yesterday, right? And you're kind of
Mhm.
like, well, that doesn't kind of follow a trend, but at the same time, you're like, are they just manipulating this how they want to, because they want people to watch this? Oh, this is number one. I'm gonna watch this
Sure.
fucking this one this show, and it's nothing like what you want to watch. But I know they've done a better job of actually tailoring what you've watched before and suggesting
Yeah.
things to you. But those top 10 lists are always kind of weird to me, because I know just from living in a college town that if a bar wants more exposure, they can buy themselves onto some of those lists, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep, 100%. Yeah, and I think that that can be done in so many different places. I'm sure it's been done with Twitch before. And the whole, remember about the channel embeds. You
Mm,
put your embedded channel on a website, and then you artificially inflate the traffic onto that external website that Twitch has no jurisdiction over.
mm-hmm.
That's another way to do it. There's just so many different gimmicks and so many different tactics you can go about doing it. I think a lot of those tools, good or bad, detrimental or positive, I think a lot of those types of things have been sort of quieted down through
Yeah,
changes in the platform, but it's been done for a long time.
it has, and I think overall it's better. But it kind of when they started kind of you know nerfing some of that stuff, right? When they started
Mhm.
kind of quelling some of those external inflation type of situations,
Mhm.
it reminded me a lot of an MMA when they went to like a stricter testing, Like all of a sudden, this guy is not fighting like he used to, or this guy hasn't fought in a long time, or
Yeah.
you're kind of like, well, they did strict, make testing stricter, more strict, and they changed the way they do that, and you can see that. Holy shit, maybe something else was going on that we didn't see in the
Mhm.
background. So it's kind of, to liken it to steroid testing is
Yeah.
kind of strong, but I mean, you see that kind of thing happen, and it's a
In
very similar
concept.
thing.
Yeah.
And
In concept, I can see that. My brother-in-law is a very, very casual gamer.
Mhm.
Plays mainstream titles, always has been sort of that type of gamer, and is only familiar with Twitch because I'm involved in it in some small part.
Mhm.
And so, he gets emails and he's like, "Oh yeah, I got an email saying, hey, you should." He's like, well, it's kind of a funny story, really, because it kind of speaks to what we've been talking about here. And he said, I got an email from Twitch saying, "Hey, you might want to check some of these out." He's like, "I was looking at some of these, some of the recommended streams because he only follows me.
Yeah.
It's the only reason why he knows about it. It's the only reason why he's ever come to the platform at all." It's like, so I was bored and I clicked on one of the links that they suggested, and he's like, I couldn't. He's like, it was just. He's like, people actually watch this. And I'm like, yeah, people watch it. And he's like, I couldn't believe that this was recommended to me because it was trash. And I'm not going to say who it was, of course, but he's like, it looks like they just send you whoever is the most popular. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much that's what it is. So you're getting your viewers being directly emailed and influenced in a way by the platform itself, saying, hey, you should check these out because the most people are here. And
Yep.
again, further reinforcing because a high number of people are watching it, it must be good. And I guess that's true to an extent, because it has to be, right? If a high number of people are consuming it, then that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
The numbers are the data supports it, but what you like and don't like is, super subjective. And I think that, it gates things to an extent.
Well, and what they're chasing is the same thing YouTube's chasing. What they really want you to do is click on a stream you're not subscribed to, so that
Yeah.
you see that pre-roll,
Yep.
commercial. Like that's what they
Yep.
want. Like it's all about having that commercial scene.
Hmm.
It really isn't. I mean, sure, I'm sure they want their broadcasters to grow, but where do they make the money? They make the money because they can show that particular customer that this many people watched your commercial, and this is how
Hmm.
valuable that service is.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and you can break it down. You can do that. Like I don't know. Sometimes I feel like they say like people who know, who feel maybe are a little more informed or a little more miserable kind of thing. So I wonder if I
Hmm.
if I suffer from that, where I'm just kind of like, damn it, I know all this stuff. It's like the more you know, the more you just don't want to know and shit like that.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss, right?
Oh man, it's lovely. It's got to be wonderful. Like I meet some people, I'm just kind of like, man, it has to be great. It
Yeah.
has to be a great day to just blindly walk through and
Just
just
have
be
that
like,
fresh, innocent perspective on everything and not be so scuffed and through having been on the other side of things.
yeah, yeah. To switch gears a little bit, you and
Yep.
I have signed up for a half marathon.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm thinking that's in jeopardy, by the way.
I think it might be. It just, I don't know. I don't know. Like it's in November, so we're still another 6 months away from it.
Sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of time. I'm coming down to the point where I really need to start my training. I really haven't
Yeah.
been. Have you been keeping up with your training and everything going well as far as that
A little
respect
bit.
goes?
I ran, I think last week I did like a 6 mile, which wasn't a big deal. Um, I haven't been running as much as I would like to. I've got another half marathon that I'm signed up for. I want to say it's 2 weeks before the Disney half marathon.
Mhm.
So we really enjoy that. My wife and I really enjoy that run. It's local here in Louisville. Um, really nice run, really scenic. Takes you through some cool parts of Louisville. Very hilly, so it's good. It's a good training run for what ends up being your Disney run, which has less hills, but it's more humid. So
Right.
for those uninitiated in the whole in running, distance running, those environmental factors are huge. And so you can go from steep terrain and things like that, or even off-road type stuff, and then translate to something more flat. But because the weather's different, it just wipes you out in ways that even more hills and more aggressive, more difficult tracks or courses
Mm-hmm.
will the weather will wipe you out in ways that even the more difficult courses won't. So it's a good training run for that too. So we like to kind of pair them with one another. So it's kind of like the Louisville, the urban bourbon is what it's called. it's kind of a good warm up run to something that you would do in Disney.
Yeah, and so for those that don't know, it's the what is it called, the food and wine half.
Food and wine, yep, food and wine half marathon.
Yeah, it's in Disney. I've done a 10K in Disney before. I did the Star Wars 10K one year a few years ago. A lot of fun. You get to run through the parks, and it's it's pretty rewarding to complete something like that. So the reason why we're saying it might be in jeopardy is obviously with what's going on. Are they even going to have the
Right.
parks open? All that stuff. I would imagine they're going to try to get them open before then, but it's a lot of people. Like a lot of people go to those races. Like I remember lining up for the 10K, and I was in heat 5 or something like that, and it was just kind of like every time you're shoulder to shoulder with people, like at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
So
I think they said for last year's food and wine, we ran the food and wine half last year, and I think they said we did the 10K and the half back to back. So it's like the challenge. So you do the 10K on Saturday and the half marathon on Sunday. So you don't get a rest day in between, which is where the challenge comes in. And I think they told us when we lined up for one, there was like 10,000 or 11,000 for one, and there was 15,000 for the other.
Jeez,
there's a lot of people, man.
It's a ton of people.
So,
and you're jammed in. Like you obviously you start to spread out as the race goes on, and things, you get your own space. But in the beginning, you're literally having to kind of pace yourself because you can't, like it's coveted to have those front spots in a heat because they want that for people with good times, and I get that. But
yeah.
man, for a while until you get kind of spread out, you're just kind of like, all right, we're breathing
for a minute.
Right, we're breathing heavy, we're sweating all over the place, and I mean, there's no way you're getting 6 feet in between everyone. So
Not at all. Not unless you canceled. You canceled. I would say what 70% of participants.
Yeah, and then still had the same amount of heats, like just spread out. And I'm wondering if they're going to make an adjustment for that. I don't know. I don't know if they are.
I see it being canceled personally, but it's too early to know for sure. Who knows what's going to happen? A lot with this because of the scale and the scope of the impact. Everything's happening really, really fast with it. So who knows? I mean, we may end up having some sort of viable treatment of some kind for this sooner than we think. Probably not, but we may, And so I think that's really going to be kind of the only hope for it, in my opinion.
Again, I like I said at the top of the broadcast, like I would love to be wrong. Just make me wrong. I don't care,
Yep.
I would love it, but everybody's kind of holding, like not everybody, but there's a lot of people who are just kind of like, what's the fall going to look like? What's going to happen when summer's over? And
especially when you hear experts talking about, we're going to have a second wave in the fall and it's going to be worse than the first one. And it's like, man, like, I hope that's false, but it might be real. Who knows?
They're controlling the narrative. Like, all right,
who's making money off of this?
Yeah, and I don't know. It's a weird time, but like I said, I hope it's wrong. I'd like to go back to normal shit, but
I'm ready for it. That's for sure.
Absolutely. What have you been watching lately?
Watching Billions. Billions is a damn good show.
I've heard great things. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, it's really good. Really, really good. And then the new Penny Dreadful is also on Showtime. That's been excellent also, yeah.
Why did I think that was over for some reason? How many seasons is that now?
So this is a spinoff to the original. So the first one took place in in London, and then this is in 1920s or 1930s LA. So it's kind of got that LA noir feel to it with a sort of a supernatural twist to it. Really, really good so far. They're only 3 episodes in, but it's been great. And then we've been catching up on some BuzzFeed stuff on Amazon. I don't know if you've watched any of those, like the BuzzFeed Unsolved, BuzzFeed Supernatural. Really, really funny. A couple of it feels like very highly produced YouTube content.
Okay. I didn't even know that was a thing. That's kind of cool. So is it kind of like a variety kind of panel show, or is it more of a
2 guys, like for Unsolved and for Supernatural, it's 2 guys with BuzzFeed who will go on site to various locations. Like for the Supernatural, you can I don't know if do you have watch parties enabled for your channel on Twitch?
I think I've got the ability to.
Yeah, so you could do a watch party if you wanted to check it out with your community sometime. You can stream that. But it's 2 guys for Supernatural, for example. They'll go to a place that's allegedly haunted or has had previous reports of activity, and they will do like vlog style sort of content. They'll like stay the night in a prison that's haunted, or in a house that's haunted, or where there have been the famous murders years and years ago, and they'll try to see if there's any activity and document it. But they have a really good synergy, a really good dynamic between the 2 of them. and it makes for pretty good viewing.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing. Kind of like a Ghost Hunters type deal.
Kinda, yeah, but it feels a lot less bullshitty.
Right, right.
It feels more authentic because they're not like, I don't think there's anything fake being, like a lot. I think a lot of those, and this is my speculation, of course, but I assume with a lot of those ghost hunter shows that anything that could potentially be seen as activity is probably staged, or written in somehow. I think it's probably pretty fair to say that, but who knows?
So this is more so people kind of hanging out in a spot and shit talking.
They're trying to listen to see if anything happens. They have some of these devices that could potentially pick up something, and nothing ever really happens. But like, it's still they're funny to watch. So even if nothing happens, if there's no activity, they're still an enjoyable duo to watch. They have good chemistry and they're funny. So
that's awesome. That's fucking awesome. We've just finished up Ozark.
Yeah, the wife's been trying to get me to watch that, but I've been a little bit resistant. I don't know why, for no particular reason.
I don't know why it took me so long, but it's on that level. It's on that level of like Breaking Bad ridiculous in some cases, but it's written so well that you're kind of like, okay. I mean, look, I obviously this is way blown out of proportion and this would never happen, but it's written in such a way where you're just kind of like, I still want to know what the fuck happens. Like, I want to know what ridiculous resolution they come to here.
Sure, sure. Right.
But it's got that vibe to it, and it's not. I don't know why I resisted it for so long too. I don't know if it was just the fact that I don't know. Sometimes I get in this mode where people like suggest things to me so much that I'm just like, I'm gonna not watch it because you keep telling me to watch it. Like it's just one of those things.
I did that with The Hangover, the movie The Hangover, for years. Everyone's told me, have you seen it yet? And then it became a thing. Like, oh, Bryan hasn't seen the Hangover yet. Can you believe that? I'm like, no, I haven't. And so like, because they made it to be such a big deal that I hadn't seen it yet, I almost wore it like a badge of honor. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna watch it. And somebody, you have to watch it. No, I won't.
There's Star Wars people like that out there. They're like, nope, never gonna watch it. Never gonna watch it. It's like, I don't know what you're proud of, but okay.
I know how much it bothers you, so that's why I'm going to keep on not watching it.
And I've got a theory that most of those people have watched it. They're just telling people they haven't watched it. Yeah,
they're closet huge Star Wars fans, but they tell everybody publicly, no, I haven't seen it.
Just bins and bins of fucking action figures somewhere stashed away.
Yeah,
they just sit at night, look at them with a flashlight. But no, Ozark actually ended up being really good. I think the third season just came out. Last month or the month before. So so it's got 3 seasons and they're pretty lengthy. It's written really well. I think worth a watch for sure. What else have we been watching? I've been watching
on the whole Tiger King hype train.
I did. We watched it probably because I mean you couldn't have timed that more perfectly. It came out like right when the quarantine started. So everybody was just looking for shit to do.
Right.
I thought it was ridiculous. It was fun though. Like it's one of those things where I think I got more enjoyment out of the. You've seen it, right?
Oh yeah.
I've got more enjoyment out of the montages of the music videos. Like I was like, this is fucking incredible that this is a real song. But
it wasn't him singing it though. Not that anybody's surprised by that, but maybe some people were surprised by that. He didn't sing any of those songs.
He was just
lip synced him in a stupid music video.
He's like the Milli Vanilli of country music.
Right.
But I've got friends that refuse to watch it because it's the thing to watch, and I'm just like, come on, man, it's ridiculous. It's funny. Like they're like, no,
it's over the top. Right.
I'm not jumping on that train. I'm like, all right, whatever.
You're just missing out on just something to fill your time with that's amusing. Just go do it. You'll laugh. You'll be glad you did.
And at the same time, I know ridiculous things that those people watch, and I'm just kind of like, you watch some ridiculous shit. You don't want to watch this. Come on.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, we watched Tiger King. So Ozark, I give approval to. We watched a couple of movies this past week. The Lodge, which is a horror movie. It's pretty damn good. And one that surprised me was, and it got pretty good ratings, Gretel and Hansel. I guess it just came out.
Jeremy Renner and I forget her name.
No, that's Hansel and Gretel, and it's done almost like a I
got the names confused there.
like a vampire hunter type of situation where they're like
or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
Van Helsing-esque. So this one came out, I think, late last year or early this year, and it's got the main girl from It Chapter One, the redhead that kind of looked like Molly Ringwald. Um,
Okay.
so she's Gretel in this, and she's got her little brother, and it follows the same kind of narrative, but it kind of gives a different spin on it, and it's really fucking creepy. It's really creepy. Got a lot of crazy imagery, really good set design, shit like that. So we did that. We've been actually prepping to go back and watch, because I haven't finished it. Go back and watch Deadwood.
That is an amazing series. I really enjoyed that.
I've only seen the first season, so I want to go back and watch the seasons and then watch the movie, because I know the movie came out last year.
The movie came out last year, and we were really excited about it. We made kind of like a date night out of it, but it didn't have the same. It was a nice way to kind of cap it off, and I think you'll probably see this when you get through it all yourself, but I certainly won't spoil anything for you, but I will say that at the risk of giving you putting an idea in your head, it was a nice way to cap everything off, but you could just kind of feel the years in between production. In between, it didn't have the same magic. It was still very, very good. But it didn't, it's missing that little extra something that they had going for them at the time.
Well, and there's something to be said about, momentum, right? Like there's something to be said about like something that's carrying in a certain way. So you can almost feel it. I don't know if you watched El Camino at all. But it was kind of the similar situation with Breaking Bad, where years later they've gone back and they basically picked up where they left off, but everybody looks older. Everybody's like, everybody's almost 10 years older.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and this for Deadwood, I want to say it was what, 15 or 17 years?
Something.
Yeah, or something like that. Really long time.
But I love all the actors that are in it, and I love going back and watching old HBO stuff anyway, because so many people who are huge now, like, were in those shows because it was
That made them, right?
Yeah, that made them. So Deadwood, or even something like The Sopranos. But one of my favorites is Oz. Was incredible, and everybody who's anybody on TV and movies at least had a small part in it. It was kind of like a weird Law and Order type of situation where
right.
I know that guy kind of thing. But so we're gonna go back and watch Deadwood. My wife really wants to watch, and I loved this show. I just hate that they couldn't continue it. Carnival.
Yeah. So are they supposedly working on something for that, or is that?
That's been the rumor for years. I mean, I would love it.
I didn't watch it, I have to admit. My wife, huge Carnival fan, loved it, absolutely loved it.
It was done so fucking well, man.
She consumed so much of HBO stuff. I mean, she just went through those shows. She Carnival, and then she went through and watched. Was it actually? I'm not 100% sure it was HBO. It was 6 Feet Under.
Yes, HBO. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I remember she was all about those for a while.
Here's my favorite thing to ask people about 6 Feet Under, because it happened to me. Did it make her overly emotional?
Yeah, it did. It really did.
Did it really affect her mentally? Because it destroyed me.
For a time, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like I tell people when they're like, I'm thinking about watching 6 Feet Under, I'm like, do yourself a favor, don't watch more than 2 in a row, because if you binge it, you're going to be really depressed.
Yeah, well, I mean, all shows about death, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it is, but they just figure out a way to write it to make you really feel it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really a tragedy, and it's done so well. And at the same time, you've got moments where it's really fucking funny too, but you could tell it was written and built to not be consumed all at once. It was written to be taken week to week so you could process it and get over it and shit like that. Yeah. But so many people I know, and I love to ask that question, is like, how depressed were you when you were done? They're like, I was incredibly depressed.
You know what made my wife really depressed was when she watched Rome. Did you ever watch Rome?
I did.
Like at the end of that, she was just a mess. I don't know if she was just wrapped up in the relationship, but she was just she was a wreck.
It's amazing how TV shows can do that to people, where it's just like you get so immersed in it and you get so exposed to like a certain aspect. It's kind of like working that empathy muscle that we talked about earlier, where it's like, especially with something like Rome, where they focus a little bit, on the impoverished side of things, and you get to really see how rough people were living back in those days, and you're just kind of like, God damn, that hit me hard.
Yeah. The other, I forgot to mention this when you asked me what I was watching, but The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls.
Oh,
doc
yeah.
on ESPN. So I'm from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, and the Bulls were everything to me in the '90s. Growing up in the '90s, Michael Jordan. My entire room was just wall to wall, floor to ceiling, Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls posters and the jerseys and the shoes. I still collect Jordan shoes. So I mean, that's been a big one for me too. So I've watched all of those twice. Um, Being from Chicago and having that in the local news all the time, that might be some of the stuff might not be well known to some, but for me, it's kind of going back in time. It's kind of like a time capsule in a way, because I remember watching these games live, which, were broadcast locally, in some cases only locally. I've actually been to quite a few games where Jordan played like live in the United Center. And so for some of this for me is not only going back and relearning and being re-exposed to things that I knew about. Like it's some of it's new, but some of it in a way is just kind of going back in time, and which really pulls at like the nostalgia,
Yeah, I was, I haven't talked to really anybody who, I've talked to people who've watched it, but I mean, I haven't talked to anybody who's like grew up in Chicago during the time. How surreal did that nostalgia feel? Like, was it just, did you immediately feel like you were that age again? You were back in the
Oh,
90s?
absolutely. Yeah, that it took me right back. So especially seeing like some of the newsreels, from that time that are in there.
Mhm.
I remember watching some of those games live as they happened, and it definitely brought me back. Some of the stuff with like the thing that makes it interesting for me, even for someone who kind of grew up in the area and is a little bit more familiar with some of those things, the behind the scenes look at some of the relationships that were sort of rumored to have been kind of tense at the time. Um, to kind of see some of those talked about in more depth and more detail. Those were interesting to me. And then again, the nostalgia component to seeing some of the old footage. And I don't know. For me, it's like the complete package.
Yeah. How different do you think, and this will connect to something I've been watching, but how different do you think that time period would have been with the level of internet we have now?
Oh man, I can't even begin to really wrap my head around it. You know, they wrote a lot in the papers and they talked about it a lot on TV and radio, but having some of the stuff they talked about, the way things happened in the locker room and kind of on the road and stuff like that, I'm sure we would have a much different look. I think Jordan as a person tried to maintain his image pretty meticulously. I'm sure there are some skeletons in the closet. There was a lot of rumors about gambling problems and all that stuff, which I think the doc he kind of attempts to kind of make clear on a few things and paint a certain way. Obviously, the skeptic in me is always going to kind of question how legit some of those stories are.
Sure.
How much is protecting the image. Naturally, it's good business for him being as big as he is, and how much money he sees and his enterprises see to protect that and to continue to protect it. But I think with the internet, social media, and things like that, I think the story would be a lot different personally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just think about how much easier it was to protect those things then. Is like at
Yeah.
that point,
Right.
you're just kind of like, even if something got out, if you didn't happen to catch the live news report on it, or happen to have that one, newspaper that had some story in it, it probably vanished pretty fucking quickly. Because I mean, we even see with the immortality of information on the internet, even that stuff gets forgotten after a while.
Oh, sure.
So
Right.
I imagine it was like tenfold back then when it was like either just print or just live TV. It's like, well, hey, remember when that happened? Like, yeah, I kind of remember that, but that was last year. So,
Emotions no longer attached to it either because you've moved on and forgotten about it.
well,
And
you,
then,
you don't have a million, YouTube reactions and opinions
yeah,
to go and read, a year
you're
later.
trying to make a buck off of reacting to it.
Mhm.
It's not even, yeah. Um, yeah. And even if it was broadcast locally, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean the ripple effects would have expanded all the way out. Some people would have known about it, and then you get far enough out and be like, no, never heard about that. I never knew about that.
Yeah,
It
it's
happened. I can tell you it happened. I remember seeing about it, hearing about it.
yeah,
I'm like, no, we never heard that. It's
right.
different when it's local.
And I bet I think about things like that, like people who were gigantic at one point, right? Like let's even say someone like a Bill Cosby, right? You know,
Yeah.
How long was he able to cover that up? You know, it was a long fucking time because it's apparently a well-known thing around Hollywood and show business, but
right,
we didn't know. You know, it was a thing. We're like, that's just the Cosby Show, man. I watched the shit out of that.
America's Dad, right?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of fucking wild. Jello guy, come on.
Yeah.
But so in that vein, I've been watching. Vice has done a series on wrestling called The Dark Side of the Ring.
I've seen that on my Hulu is recommending it to me.
It's really, really good. Like it's
check that out.
yeah, it's done really well. Especially if you like most people our age, you had to watch some level of wrestling when you were a kid, right? WWF, stuff like that. They had the first one I watched was a documentary about the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, and they're only about 45 minutes long without commercials. It is just incredibly good. So from that, I ended up watching like 2 more yesterday. So that was like most of my day was watching.
Check that out.
Yeah, my wife walked in. She's like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "Oh, it's The Dark Side of the Ring." It's like all these wrestlers and all this crazy shit they did before the internet. And what's that?
You roll her eyes and walk out.
Pretty much. She's just kind of, okay, all right.
A little pat on the head.
Yeah.
Have a good time.
Just happy she's not having to sit down and watch it kind of shit.
Right.
But I was talking with one of my friends that I grew up with. Actually, you know, Crucial. So like we sat and talked about it a little bit because we both grew up together watching some of that stuff. And I'm kind of like, man, all the crazy shit that went on that nobody had any clue about, you know, there wasn't any internet to rat on people, or, you know, there was no smartphones to catch people in the act. Like just the sheer amount of stories that probably will fall through the cracks and never be heard, you know, from some of these wrestlers. And those guys were like on the road all the time. You're talking about 14, I think they said back in the 80s and early 90s, your contract with the WWF was 14 days on and 4 off. Like,
wow.
And that was it. Like year round too. Like you didn't have like, you know, maybe your 4 days happened to fall on a holiday sometimes, but a lot of times it didn't, kind of thing.
All these events take place at different venues. So that makes sense. Yeah. I never even thought about that, you know, because it's always at home on your TV. Just as a kid, you always assume it's in the same place, but it's not, you know. And I guess I've moved on from wrestling since I was a kid. Like I watched it as a kid when I was young, and then I was like, oh, it's fake. I'm not interested anymore. I don't really like the narrative or whatever my reasons were at the time. I don't know, but you know, I moved on. I kind of outgrew it, and then I never really looked back at it. So in retrospect, you kind of like, oh man, as a kid, I would have just assumed it was always in the same place. I never would have known any better. That is kind of weird to think about now.
Yeah, it's weird to think back on. And like I watched wrestling a lot as a kid, and then I kind of fell off from it, and then I kind of came back to it back when it got big in the late 90s, you know, when I was in high school. It's just what all my friends were watching, so we all kind of got into it together. Yeah. So I don't know, it's just really cool to look back on, because I like that behind the music type of situation where you're like, oh man, they were dealing with some real shit, like when they weren't on camera kind of thing, and even sometimes when they were on camera. So it was it's a cool, and I can't suggest it more. Dark Side of the Ring from Vice.
Let's take a peek at that.
Yeah, you'll really enjoy it. But well, man, we've been going almost 2 hours. I think we can wrap this thing up.
That sounds good.
Yeah, man.
Sounds good. It's been fun. We need to do this. We need to do this more often.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be back and doing it. I've taken mostly a break this year. This is only the second one I've done in 2020, podcast wise.
Okay.
I took a huge break from it just because I think, very similar to what we were talking about with streaming, I just burnt myself out. Like I was just putting so much pressure on myself to put things out, and I was just kind of like, I came to kind of a realization. It's like, I can take a break for a little while, and I can come back and not be as intense about it as I was. I can have a little more fun with it and just have conversations with people I want to. I was kind of talking to some people, like there would be people that I'd have on where I was kind of like, I'm not having fun with this, and it had nothing to do with the person. It just had to do with the fact that I was just kind of like, I had so much pressure on myself. So it's nice to wind it back around and just have more casual conversations. So
absolutely. Well, anytime you know how to reach me.
Absolutely. You can follow him on Twitter at ApeFist, and check him out on Twitch, ape_fist. I'll have links to his stuff on lopezradio.com, and you can follow the show at Lopez Radio. And I stream on Twitch every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday, twitch.tv/Lopez Radio. Ape, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Talk to you in just a second.
Pleasure. Thank you.